Matthew Stafford or Drake May? Who do y'all think is going to win the MVP? Me personally, even after the terrible performance Matt Stafford put up against the Carolina Panthers having 3 turnovers, I still got Matthew Stafford as the MVP. Simply put, his stats are ridiculous this year. He hasn't turned the ball over until recently. He has the best team in the NFC even after the Carolina Panthers loss, and I believe he's the rightful choice of the MVP. Who knows what the second half of the season will do? Who knows what his stats will be in the second half of the season? Who knows if the Rams will fall off a cliff? But most likely, they will not, and he will win the MVP. But with that being said, there have been some fraudulent ass awards in the NFL, especially recently, and I figured my most popular video was already talking about fraudulent NFL awards. So let's get into it. This is the most fraudulent awards in NFL history. Wait. Before we even get into this video, like, comment, subscribe. Your support is very welcomed. I love every time I see it. I love when I see comments on these videos. I want to make a community that can have nuanced conversations. But anywho, let's get right into the video. First off, we're starting off with the 1990 MVP, Joe Montana. Obviously, I'm a big 49ers fan. I love Joe Montana. I love Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott. I love everything about the 80s and 90s 49ers. But Joe Montana did not deserve this MVP. Point blank period. And in the 1990 season, there was 2 contenders in this MVP race that put up better stats. They were on playoff teams, and they were more valuable to their teams winning. And number 1 is Randall Cunningham, one of the greatest dual threat quarterbacks of all time. I wish he could play in the modern game because as a quarterback talent, he might be the most talented quarterback of all time when it comes to running, when it comes to passing, when it comes to versatility. He is a top 10 most talented quarterback in NFL history. And this was the best year of his career. The Eagles went 10-6 this season. He won 22% of the shares to Joe Montana's 32% of the MVP votes. This year, he threw for 3,466 yards, which is 300 yards less than Joe Montana. But he threw for 30 touchdowns, which is 4 more touchdowns than Joe Montana, and 13 interceptions, which is 3 less interceptions than Joe Montana. And rushing wise, he almost rushed for 1,000 yards this season. He was 60 yards away from being the first quarterback in NFL history to rush for 1,000 yards. And a quarterback wouldn't rush for 1,000 yards in NFL season until almost 15 years later. He was ahead of his time. To go along with that, he had 5 rushing touchdowns. So he had 35 touchdowns in total, which is more than Joe Montana. He was more efficient than Joe Montana. He had almost the same completion percentage as Joe Montana, and he threw less interceptions. This one baffles me completely because yes, Joe Montana was the feature quarterback and the face of the NFL at the time in the 80s dynasty of the 49ers. But if we are going objectively, if we are going by stats, if we're going by who's more valuable to their team winning any games this season, it's Randall Cunningham. He put up better stats. His team made the playoffs. He had a less talented roster, and he simply just did more. Now, of course, I don't hate Joe Montana winning this because he does deserve the 87 MVP or Jerry Rice because John Elway did not deserve to win an MVP throwing 19 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. But this MVP he objectively did not deserve, and my vote would go to Randall Cunningham. Hell, like I said, there's one more guy I would have put over Joe Montana. Warren Moon. Warren Moon's arguably the greatest black quarterback of all time. Besides Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and Patrick Mahomes. He didn't get drafted in the NFL. Hell, they wanted him to switch to wide receiver even though he is not a dual threat quarterback. But this year, Warren Moon threw for 4,689 yards, which would be top 10 all-time passing yards in a season at this point in the NFL history. He threw for 33 touchdowns, which is 7 more than Joe Montana, and he threw 13 interceptions, which is 3 less than Joe Montana, to go with 215 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And not to mention his completion percentage was almost identical to Joe Montana. He put up better numbers throughout the whole year and outperformed him in almost any individual stat category you can look at. Simply put, Joe Montana might have been the best quarterback in the world at this point, but the better quarterback this season was Randall Cunningham and Warren Moon. Honestly, I don't think they're ready to give a black quarterback the MVP. And this is no disrespect to Joe Montana. He's often disrespected when it comes to the GOAT debates, putting Peyton Manning above him, putting Patrick Mahomes above him, but this ugly ass nigga could really sling the rock though. But yep, for the 1990 MVP, I'm going Randall Cunningham. Number 2 fraudulent award, 2015 Defensive Player of the Year. This award was won by Khalil Mack, who had a great season, having 11 sacks on the year, 54 solo tackles, and leading the Raiders to their first playoff berth in years. Now, while Khalil Mack is one of the most dominant defensive players of his era, while he is going to be a future Hall of Famer, maybe not first ballot, but he will be in the Hall of Fame at some point, he just didn't deserve this Defensive Player of the Year, point blank period. And at this time, I believe the Defensive Player of the Year should have went to the best player in the world, in my opinion, in 2015, which was Von Miller. Von Miller is the definition of being the shaft and never the tip, because there's several years he was up for Defensive Player of the Year, and he never won one in his Hall of Fame first ballot career. And yes, he is the first ballot Hall of Famer, because the year before this, he had the greatest defensive postseason in NFL history, and I don't think it's really too close. But let's talk about his 2015 year. Compared to Khalil Mack, they both played 16 games, he had more solo tackles, he had 3 less assists, and he had 2 2.5 more sacks. He was the best player on his team. He was the best player in the world. He was coming off one of the greatest defensive postseasons of all time. He had his 3rd season of 10 plus sacks. He made first team All-Pro in back-to-back seasons. His legacy is cemented. All he needed was a defensive player of the year, and they gave it to the wrong guy in Khalil Mack. Statistically, it doesn't make sense. The only reason I could see you putting Khalil Mack over him is because his team had a better record. This year, the Denver Broncos went 9-7, placed 3rd in their division, while the Oakland Raiders went 12-4 and placed 2nd in their division. But regardless of that, if we're going by what player had the biggest defensive impact, who was more valuable to the defense and his team winning, it was Von Miller. It just doesn't make sense if you have more sacks, more assists, more tackles for a loss, more pressures, more quarterback hits, more anything you can think of at the same position, and you lose defensive player of the year to someone who has less amount of statistical output than you. That just personally doesn't make sense to me, and if I was a voter, I would not vote it for Khalil Mack. And also, shout out to Aaron Rodgers this year. There's a real case you could have made. He should have won the MVP this year. Next up is the 2014 MVP that went to Salvia boy Aaron Rodgers. Before Aaron Rodgers was on Salvia, before Aaron Rodgers owned a DMT card, this dude was the best quarterback in the league, one of the most efficient passers I've ever seen, one of the greatest passers I've ever seen. And in 2014, he won the MVP. Now, if you said he deserved it, you're not wrong, because as a quarterback, this dude threw 4,381 yards, 38 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. That's ridiculous. But for me, this is the only time in NFL history I believe this, but JJ Watt should have won the MVP this year. JJ Watt was in New York, he would have won it. But this year, JJ Watt had the greatest defensive season of all time. He had 5 passes defended as a defensive end. He had a pick 6. He had the 2nd most tackles for a loss in an NFL season. He had 20.5 sacks, and he had 5 total touchdowns as a defensive end. This is the greatest defensive season in NFL history, and it doesn't come remotely close. When you have 3 receiving touchdowns and 2 defensive touchdowns and the most tackles for a loss in NFL history, to combine that with 20.5 sacks, you are the best player in the NFL, and you should have won MVP, because there is no more valuable person play for play than 2014 JJ Watt in 2014, in my opinion. 38 touchdowns to 5 interceptions is great. If you compare that to the greatest defensive season of all time, he shouldn't have won MVP. It should have been JJ Watt. If Lawrence Taylor had this season, he would have won it. And the crazy thing is, truthfully, in modern NFL history, this is the only time a defensive player should have legitimately won the NFL MVP. That's how impressive this season was by JJ Watt. You can get any Aaron Donald season. You can get any Lawrence Taylor season. You can almost get any Reggie White season out of maybe 1987, and it doesn't compare to what JJ Watt did in 2014. He had the 2nd most tackles for a loss in an NFL season, and number 1 is him. Peak for peak, he peaked as the greatest defensive player ever, and we do not talk about it enough. In his last season, he had 12.5 sacks after all the injuries. His floor is a 12.5 sack season. I think of JJ Watt very highly. I grew up in the early mid 2010s era, so that's why I view JJ Watt as this all-time great, which he rightfully is, because if you go bar for bar, stat for peaks in NFL history, the only player you can compare to him is early years Reggie White. But anywho, for the 2014 NFL MVP, it should have legitimately went to JJ Watt, and I'll die on that hill, really. Next up is the 1982 NFL MVP. This is an iconic one because a kicker won the MVP in the NFL. I can't imagine the outrage if Justin Rapist Tucker won the MVP over a guy like Dan Fouts, and the modern day equivalent of Dan Fouts is like Justin Herbert. Somebody who hasn't won an MVP, somebody who doesn't have any accolades, somebody who had a deserving season of MVP in the year he should have won it, and losing to Justin Tucker, the rapist. I'm not saying Mark Mosley is a rapist, like Justin Tucker, the rapist. Did you know Justin Tucker's a rapist? Allegedly. But anywho, this dude isn't even in the Hall of Fame. He's not even considered like a top 10 kicker of all time. He had a really good year. This is his only first team All-Pro as a kicker. And even though this might be the weakest offensive year in NFL history in 1982, because Dan Fouts only threw 17 touchdowns to 11 interceptions in a strike-shortened season, and Marcus Allen only rushed for 697 and 11 touchdowns to 2 competing with him, there is no way in hell you are convincing me that a kicker should have won the NFL most valuable player. He's not an every down player. This is like giving an MVP to Devin Hester. Shout out Devin Hester, I love you, man. But there's no season, no way, no how you should have won the MVP. And if you're a kicker, absolutely fucking not. I'm sure he had a great leg. I'm sure he made some great kicks, but no way. The 1982 MVP should have been Dan Fouts. Next is the one we've all been waiting for, the 2024 NFL MVP. Josh Allen won this MVP. Should he have won it? Absolutely fucking not, and here's why. We we can go by more valuable player to team success. Without Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have yet to make the playoffs. Without Lamar Jackson in 2025, the Ravens didn't win a single football game. But the instant this dude comes back, they're at the top of their division. They took a bad loss last week, but they're at the top of their division and won 5 of their last 6. And maybe you're basing it off of, what if Josh Allen was off the Bills? But should a nigga win an MVP based off of what if? Like, be fucking serious. My bad, let me chill. But this year, Lamar Jackson had more passing yards with 4,172 to Josh Allen's 3,731. He had more passing touchdowns at 41 passing touchdowns to Josh Allen's 28. He had less interceptions at 4 interceptions to Josh Allen's 6 interceptions. He had more rushing yards at 915 to Josh Allen's 531, but he did have less rushing touchdowns at 4 to Josh Allen's 12. In total, Lamar Jackson had 45 touchdowns to 4 turnovers. Josh Allen had 40 touchdowns to 6 turnovers. Lamar was more efficient. He had a better completion percentage. He had less pass attempts and had over 13 more touchdowns. He had the better record. He had the #1 overall seed in the entire AFC, yet you give it to a DEI award winning Josh Allen. Makes 0 sense. The only thing you could base this off of is a what if. How the fuck did the voters let Josh Allen win based off of what if? The thing about Josh Allen being the most valuable player, because if Josh Allen was off the Bills, they would be terrible. You can't argue with someone if they're just going to use a hypothetical. If we just deny reality completely, there is no reality to argue over. This is not the only thing this happens in politics, but we're not getting into that. That happens all the fucking time. If you constantly just deny reality, deny what happened, and just put hypotheticals and hypotheticals and hypotheticals, you might get your fucking answer. And if your answer is based completely off of hypotheticals, then how the fuck is that a good answer? You ever do a school project, my nigga? You ever write an essay? Instead of having fucking sources, you just put in hypothetical scenarios where your answer would be reality, my nigga. You would get a fucking F, bro. Like, dead ass, bro. I don't understand it. Cite your sources. Well, hypothetically, if MLK was drunk when he was giving the I Have a Dream speech, black people wouldn't get rights. Well, we have rights, nigga! Basically, what I'm saying is, Lamar Jackson should have won his 3rd MVP. Josh Allen should have won this MVP. It was a DEI award to Josh Allen. And that'll be the end of this video. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch y'all boys later. Peace.